did some research into one of these backgrounds. I know you posted that. I can't remember which one. What was that? Coffee breath? Which one? You said you missed the conversation.
Yeah, the Mesopotamian cosmology one. I went to University of Chicago, okay, for
Okay.
ancient Near Eastern linguistics and Hebrew Bible. Studied a little bit about Mesopotamian mythology and stuff like that at that
All
time.
right. So they should be up your ballpark then too.
Yeah, we'll see
So
how much I
like,
remember.
yeah, so there's like, so you have linguistics, so it's sort of like memes, right? So you have these words that like travel. So does the cosmology, like, it's because it's a similarity in language that the concepts transfer? Is it's like they develop like just parallel concepts because of the similarity in language? That's like, that's why I'm reading this book. It's like parallelism. Is it parallel because there's similarity in language, or did they steal it entirely from the other culture?
I don't know if it's stealing so much as it's just growing up in what was the science of that era, and the science of that era was a flat Earth naturalistic model, and so that
Yeah.
that was all they had access to. So they just had the same. They relied on the same findings.
Yeah. Well, that's why I found out like in the Central American cultures, they believed like was it 15 heavens, 9 layers of hell, and then the earth. Like all these cultures, they like the earth was what they saw around them, the heavens was what was above the sky, the earth, what was below them kept them propped up, and the underworld was what was ever below them that propped them up. Like, and the people, when they died, they buried them, they went in the underworld, and eventually they ascended up to the above them. So like,
Yeah, well, that there's a it's a very similar model, but in the ancient Near East, it was more like the entire universe is a colossal ocean of chaos, and the god blows a bubble in it, and
yeah,
the land appears inside that bubble, and that's what we live in. And outside of that bubble is just water everywhere.
yeah, that's sort of why I was trying to explain with the Mesopotamian one. They thought it was like you were like in like a dome, not a dome, but like walled in area that the air was put in. Yeah, sort of like this is where, but the Hebrew one is more like a dome where there's air in there, the land in there. You don't want to go out past the water, you're going to die, because no one ever returned if they went too far out. So,
Well, yeah, the Mesopotamian was definitely a dome as well. This very similar word, rakia, uh, is the
hmm,
Hebrew word. Rakukum is the uh, Akkadian word, and literally that word means to take metal. Like if this was a little piece of metal and you hammer it thin and stretch it
yeah,
out, that's rakukum. So when you're doing this, you're hammering something out. Um, and if you hammer it out into a bowl shape, you've made a rakia. So
hmm,
the rakia, the sky in Hebrew, is literally just a solid thing that's been hammered out into a dome.
okay, yeah. So it looks like we'll see what happens tomorrow, but it looks like I'm going to have a debate with Whitsitt on modern day debate on geocentrism versus heliocentrism. But like, I want to make half the debate about how you can just believe in the strong anthropic principle and make like you the center, like your purpose is the center of creation, because God, you can have abiogenesis happening necessarily through God's divine providence. Like when he initiated the Big Bang, he made it so you would evolve. Like, and you can have the concepts of Adam and Eve be like they lived in Eden in heaven, and then they did original sin in heaven, and then they were cast out of heaven and took upon layers of skins. And this is what my dad taught me as a kid. So these concepts of Adam and Eve being in heaven, and people thought of this stuff like 50 years ago. that Adam and Eve were in heaven, and there were other humans on Earth at the time. So it meshed with the concept of evolution still being on Earth, right? That we still could think of ancient humans on Earth, and then Adam and Eve were cast out of heaven, and they were that's where original sin came from, was for their actions in Eden in heaven, and then they eventually married into humans on Earth, and then eventually everybody descended from those Adam and Eves, and then you can like think of different concepts of the flood and stuff like that than just a global flood. And I can think of other various ideas that do away with the concept of the earth was entirely flooded with water. And to include like people of like even during the Greg Locke and Dean Odle debate, he was showing like the firmament being examples of it being like the northern lights. Like there's they describe them as like emerald and like these colors and stuff, and then they showed the northern lights as an example. See, you can even see these colors with the northern lights. I'm like, well, that could be like the Van Allen belts capturing like the solar winds. Like, well, why couldn't like there have been like a wipeout of the Van Allen belts, and we had a solar storm that could have wiped out humans or a lot of humans? And then an arc, like concepts of arcs don't have to be an arc that protects people at sea. An arc could protect people from solar winds. Like you could have different concepts, because the Bible doesn't have to be read literally. It doesn't have to be taken literally. So
Yeah, not only does it not have to be taken literally, it can't.
yeah,
If you try to read it literally, you have to eventually take some things figuratively, or say favor one literal interpretation over a different literal
yeah,
interpretation. You run into that with Genesis 2. There's two different creation
yeah,
accounts, and you've got to pick one. So would we just pick the one that came first if you're doing a literal interpretation? You know, the reason that one comes first is because the redactor put the P source before the J source. So
yeah. There's no reason to take either of them literally either.
no, absolutely
And
not. And
yeah,
that's my belief, is that the reason that there are two is to indicate that the redactor didn't think that either of them should be taken literally. He's saying that
yeah.
you shouldn't read this literally. Here's two different accounts. Let's just talk about our shared traditions here.
The concepts, like it's supposed to be a story of redemption and like evil, and that you need to live a certain life. And I don't agree with all the messages in the Bible. That's a different argument. My argument always is, and my arguments get, there's a book by Piers Anthony, like the where he tried to like sell like a biblical story through fantasy sort of. And I don't know if he was Christian or not, but he's like he told the story through death, and like Gaia mother, the green mother or whatever, and then God was in there and stuff like that. It would have been like heretical. But like he explained like how evolution would work and all these concepts. I read it as like a teenager, and it's like it sort of made sense. And it fits sort of like all this stuff I was learning from my dad, and this Hindu philosopher that my dad used to do study groups with all the time, and who used to study Christianity and Islam and all these other various religions. And so I got influenced by all these weird concepts that most people don't get influenced by when they're young, right? So like and where was I going with that? Oh, so like I could see like, so I always thought, so if there's a contradict, if the Bible is inerrant and science is our best method of understanding the world, and we're always messed up, right? We can't understand everything. So if the Bible's inerrant, science is the best method to understand the world, and there's a contradiction between your understanding of science and the Bible, the most likely explanation for that misunderstanding is you. Like, is you.
Well, I would say if the Bible is inerrant, then you have to answer what is it inerrant about?
Yeah.
Um, and I hold that the Bible is inerrant, but I don't think that it's historically accurate. I think that
Yeah.
it's making truth claims that are correct about the way God relates to humans, and I don't even know
Yeah.
what all of those are, but I don't know.
Yeah. I don't believe it's inerrant because I'm a
Right.
dirty atheist, but
Sure.
that's like trying to do an internal critique of the worldview. Like, I don't think you're being rational if you give up like a belief in science, because I think it is the best method we've developed as humans to understand the nature of the world. And I don't think like you should like reject abiogenesis just because there is a strong anthropic principle that you can adopt that allows you to accept abiogenesis. The strong anthropic principle means that you exist necessarily, right? It would be the premise that God set up the conditions for you to have evolved. That would be the strong anthropic principle.
I I don't know anything about that, and I don't know what my opinion is on it because I've never really thought about it.
Yeah. I want to talk about it with my debate tomorrow if I do it tomorrow against with it when I debate heliocentrism versus geocentrism. So I'm going to flip the script because I'm going to say because I think it's flawed to say heliocentrism versus geocentrism because I don't think there is a center. I think the center of all reality is unknown.
Sure.
So like you're just talking about our solar system, I think it's sort of a misnomer. It's more of a philosophical concept of what the center is. Like
Well,
the
if you're
center
talking
of
about the solar system, the center is actually the point between the sun and the Earth that we both revolve around. The sun wibbles just a little bit.
yeah. So like the center of my reality would be me, right? So it's relative reality. The center of the solar system would be the sun. I might add that, right? But the center, so it just depends on what your relationship to the center of all reality really depends. Like if you believe in God, then the center of all reality would be God's purpose. So then it's the God's providence, right? So it doesn't, a physical location doesn't mean anything to God. Like, so why are you so worried about flat Earth or whatever? Why are you so beholden to these concepts? It doesn't even make sense that God would care about the shape of the earth, like what you believe about that God would sort of want, like if God was trying to create a bunch of humans and stuff like that, why wouldn't he want you to go out there and explore and understand this wonderful universe and galaxy and stuff like that as part of his creation? Like the heavens would be infinite for an infinite number of souls to be processed to this physical plane to go to his divine heavens. So he has plenty of room for all the humans to go to. So it would make more sense to me that he would create a universe. But the center is meaningless to a god because God is, at least for all the normative concepts, is not a physical entity. It's spaceless, timeless, outside of time, outside of space, massless being. It doesn't concern itself with this physical reality. So
It sounds like what you're saying is that the center of something is a relative term. I'm not sure how much Witsit understands that things can be relative, like speed being a relative measure between two different objects. I don't know how much you would understand that.
yeah.
That you could have the center of the universe or the center of the solar system or the center of your experience of the universe. But
the only audience Witzik can convince, he's never going to convince a lot of atheists, if any atheists, to believe in the flat Earth model. Most of the people are getting convinced are Christians and stuff like that because of their religious beliefs. So I want to appeal to these type of concepts with them to not be convincing. They don't have to give up science to believe in God is what I'm trying to convince.
well, I'm a Christian and I believe in science, so I think
Yeah.
that's the predominant view. Witsit is definitely in the minority.
Yeah. And most people are Christian. So
No, I don't think that's true. I think most religious people, Christianity is the most popular religion. But if you add
in
up
the
all of the
US.
people,
Yeah.
maybe in the world, I don't know. But if you add up all the people in the world, most of them are not Christian.
Right. Most people in the US are Christian, but yeah, most people in the world are theists, but only 25% are Christian.
Right.
And like 20% are Muslim. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if Christianity is the largest religion or not, but if it is, that doesn't mean that most people are Christian. It just means it's the biggest of
Right.
all of the groups, if
That's
that's
if you
even
want to
true.
count if you want to count Catholics, then it's the largest. If
Yes,
you
I
don't want
count
to count
anybody who says
Catholics,
they're
they don't.
Christian as a Christian in my book. Even if
Okay.
Mormons say they're Christians, they're Christians. They're just a specific brand of Christian, I guess.
You can even
How?
discard Mormons, and they don't make up many, anyways.
Yeah, no. How loud is it in the background? Can you
It
hear?
is loud.
Okay, I'm gonna mute myself when I'm not
All
talking.
right.
One second.
What's up, Issa?
See, I'm chilling. Say hi. This is look
Oh
at the
wow,
little Matter Now panda.
you're the one that bought that. I was wondering who bought the panda.
I bought everything. Look,
Oh
I'm all decked
wow,
out.
awesome.
I can be your brand ambassador. See,
I know. I wish you'd waited. I didn't know like the people didn't like the black background, but anyways, it's cool. I changed the black background to get rid of the black background. If people didn't notice, but I like the black background, but
You know what? I'm gonna transfer to my computer because I think that has a better noise canceling.
okay. What do you think about the ancient Hebrew cosmology? Are you as I mean, everybody seems to know it, so I actually don't have much time for this show today either because I need to get prepared for a debate tomorrow with Witsit. Are you studying there, Issa? I guess he had to go. Hey, Hugh Hammond, what you up to? And no one's watching these streams. But anyways, this is ancient Hebrew cosmology. Human beings often presume our own world. So we have this book too, but when trying to make sense of our message or a text. So this is the same concept. Like all these worlds believed, they thought the heavens were above, flat plane, like their world, like their worldview was where they were at. And then the underworld, like Sheol. Obviously, there are many differences with the prevailing modern view of the universe. The one key difference I want to know is placement in three locations that many moderns tend to view as supernatural: Sheol, heaven, and the heaven of heavens. The heaven of heavens, waters above the firmament, heaven of heavens, gate of heavens. Oh, so God is in the heaven of heavens. Coming to you live from work trip in San Francisco. It might be too early for some, Hugh Hammond. Wow. Hey,
sorry, I'm
Dr.
back.
Bud.
I had a little bit of a lag, but I'm back. What was the last thing you said? I missed it. Sorry.
That's okay. What do you think of the Hebrew? Like, it seems to be similar to like a lot of the other concepts, except they only have two layers. They have two layers of heavens, which is a little bit different of other Near Eastern concepts. But
I mean, I think it's fascinating and interesting, and I don't, in my understanding of studying, like Tanakh and Talmud and looking at these texts, I don't think a lot of these people really looked at it as like what we consider like literalistic perspective. It was kind of like a spiritual narrative. This is like a spiritual ancestral narrative. At least like that's the understanding from my background of coming from this. I do come from secular Jews, and that's the way that they viewed it. And there's a kind of a continuity that you see, and um, I don't think folks really took this to be like the most literal thing. It's interesting when you compare Jews to Christians. Jews are very different than Christians when reading the text, in my experience.
There was this online. Well, I think ancient Jews believed this was true. A lot of the people in that area believed it was true.
I don't know if they had the concept of what we call as true now. It's a different world mindset than now. Like we view things in a very different way. So I don't know if they viewed things in the same way. Like, what does true mean? Like, do we know literally did Moses split the Red Sea? I don't know if, from my understanding of looking into Judaism, that was not the case. That Jews took that point of view. Some Jews do now, but I don't know. Maybe it was varied. I think it's never been really monolithic. So there were probably contingents that did and some that didn't.
I think Coffee Breath had something to say.
Oh, sorry. Please go ahead.
Oh, no. I was listening to what you said. But I was going to say regarding this diagram that you've shown here, the God in the heaven of heavens is one sort of viewpoint that ancient Hebrews probably had, but it's not the only viewpoint that's written in the Hebrew Bible. The Yahwistic source, the J source, has a God that's much more personable. I mean, it's literally walking around on earth, literally wrestling with Jacob. And that cosmology wouldn't have that extra layer of heaven. It would just have your waters of chaos below and above the firmament. And then your Apsu and your Ansu, or those are Akkadian terms, but you would have your sweet waters and your salt waters, and then Sheol would be under the sweet waters. So if you drill down into the ground, you find water. If you look up into the sky, you see blue, so you think water. So from that just naturalistic exploring, you think there's water beneath me, there's water above me, and that's how that cosmology develops. But this ethereal God in a heaven of heavens thing is more of a P and an E source. I don't know about E, but more of a P source God than a J source.
What's a P and a J and an E?
I can explain that too. That's really great that you brought that up. And that's a very important thing of understanding Tanakh, is that there's four kind of classical sources. You have the Yahweh source, you have the priestly source, you have like a redactor. These are like different writings that
Yahweh's the Elohist, the priestly source, the Deuteronomy,
Elohist, yes,
and then the redactor put them all together.
Yes, thank you, exactly. So you have these different sources that are kind of different avenues of the Hebraic voices. And that's like when you look at Bereshit or Genesis, you see two different kind of narratives of how the creation is, because they're two different sources. So, and that's a really powerful thing. That's why I actually really love the Gospels in the New Testament, because it shows that there were different Jewish communities. You have the Pharisees and the Sadducees that have very differing views on cosmology, like on what afterlife is. For the Sadducees, they didn't even view that there was an afterlife. These were the priests, like the priestly source. And then you have like the Pharisees, like the rabbinic element, who tended to see that there was an afterlife. So it's so complex, and Coffee Breath is right. There's so many layers of all of this stuff. It's not just a simplistic thing. There isn't like an A, B, and C. And I think that's completely true. So basically, to put it in a nutshell, you had different sources that narrated different kinds of things of the Hebrew story, of the history. You had different communities with different voices that we see that are present within the Torah. And it's really kind of cool. And I like that. And that's one of the cool things that you see. Like, people are like, why are these two contradicting things? Why are there two different creation stories? Well, the explanation is you have two different voices that are being stated. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you, Bob is correct here that the documentary hypothesis is one of those models. It's the one that I was trained in at U of C, and I think it works. A lot of people think of the Torah, that's the first 5 books of the Bible. The Tanakh, which is the other word that Issa is using, it refers to the entire Hebrew Bible, the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim, which is the Torah, the first 5 books, the Nevi'im, which is the prophets, and the Ketuvim, which is the writings. And that's like the poetry. All 3 of those things together make the Tanakh. The Torah is just the first 5 books of the Bible. In that first 5 books of the Bible, you have 4 different sources. Each source had its own history of how the Jewish nation came about. And the J source was the Yahwistic source, because J in German is pronounced Yah. So the Yahwistic source wrote its history of God making the world and interacting with humans, and that God walks around with people, talks with you, roasts a goat with you, everything. The Elohist has a different perception of God and talks about God in a very different way. Only refers to God as El, doesn't actually refer to God using the Tetragrammaton, the YHWH, Yod He Vav He, the Yahweh name. It only refers to God as El up until the burning bush. Once the burning bush happens, then God is revealed by the Elohist source as Yahweh. So that's why it's called the Elohist source. The priestly source is thought to be literally a priest who developed their history from more of a cultic perspective. So they're really heavily focused on laws and traditions and doing things that make the cultish practices. It justifies the cultist practices in a lot of ways. And then you have the Deuteronomist source, which is pretty much just the book of Deuteronomy, which is in some ways a competing book of laws for the priestly source. All four of those things existed simultaneously as disparate narratives. When the Jews were carted off into slavery into Assyria, the idea is that a redactor or a school of people took those four disparate traditions and literally stitched them together into one story without trying to harmonize them, without trying to say, this is the Yahwistic creation myth, this is the priestly creation myth, this is how these two things make sense together. The redactor literally took both of them and put them in the same book. And in my thought, maybe they were saying, here's these different traditions that we have as Jews. We're in this foreign nation, and our tribes, our histories are about to become eradicated just because we're in a different culture. So let's save them by putting them all together, and then we can have this tradition that holds everything together all at once.
So did you do like an academic program? Did you go to seminary? It sounds like you did.
MDiv, yeah.
You did MDiv, yeah. So, that's based. I did too. I did MDiv also.
Oh, nice.
I did it on like interfaith though, so like I actually studied goddess religions and stuff. It was really kind of cool. I did
I did Hebrew Bible and Ancient Near Eastern. I was really focused on the idea that magical practices that centered around humans recognizing pattern recognition. We saw disease causing, like, we didn't have a germ theory of disease, right? We just saw that if there's mold in your house, people get sick and die. So they put together these magical practices to counteract the impact of mold, and those eventually turned into religion, and then those religious laws way over time turn into the things that we build science on. So in a way, I think that religion was just the latest science of the time.
I think that's based. I think that's a really great way of looking at it, that there's this kind of evolutionary thought, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Solid hypothesis.
Yeah, somebody posted a tweet the other way that science wouldn't have happened without Christianity, even though Christianity got in a way of science, but science has had the most change, and science has done the most to change Christianity. Something like that. Like it's had this like feedback loop both ways, right? And there's a lot to say with that. Like science has changed religion a lot, but like you say, I think this pattern recognition, like we saw lightning come to this from the sky. What caused that? Something's mad. Something's really fucking mad up there.
Well, and that gets to your point about sorry, my camera's all goofy. The cosmology. In my mind, the ancient cosmology in the ancient Near East was this sea above us and this fragile bubble that we all live inside of. Marduk was the storm god in Babylon, and his big weapon was the four winds. And so when he in the Enuma Elish, when he creates the world, he literally fights with the sea goddess Tiamat. And what Marduk does is he blows all of his wind
into Tiamat, and Tiamat just swallows it, and you're left with this like, holy shit, that's everything that Marduk has to fight with, and this sea god just swallowed it. And what's Marduk going to do now? He's got no weapons left. And then Marduk's like, aha, and he just shoots an arrow and pops her because she's swallowed all of his wind. So he pops the sea goddess, and that's what creates this thing that we live in. And I think from that point on, every time there was this crazy storm, all these crazy storms are accompanied with these really strong winds. And I believe that this idea was that is Marduk reinflating the balloon. And it's so you would be afraid of these terrifying storms, but don't be afraid. Really, this is Marduk keeping us alive. If it weren't for these terrible storms, everything would collapse and we'd die.
Oh, that's solid.
Can you see where I come from as an atheist? Like
and I think most people who study religion know, like people who actually do MDivs and go to seminary, we know this stuff. We know the issues that, you know, people might view it to be fantasy, but the spirituality of folks who go to seminary is very different than lay folks. I want to put it that way. There's a very different kind of relationship that you have because you do have that skepticism. You do understand all of the influences from all of these cultures. And I was going to also add what's really kind of cool too is if you look at the Ark of the Covenant, it has lots of Babylonian imagery on it that's described in the Tanakh. So you know, and I brought this up, you were there, Ocean, when I had my conversation with David Wood. Yeah. I was like, I'm honest about that. I'm not going to say that these cultures, like, has Islam been influenced by these cultures outside? Of course it has. We'd be disingenuous and dishonest to say that it's completely unique. The whole premise of Islam is that it comes out of Judaism and Christianity. It's a continuation. It's supposed to be a part of it. So it should be influenced, and it's going to be influenced by the indigenous traditions. The Kaaba was a very important space for the indigenous religions. There's no problem with that. And I think the problem is that people want to have a specialty clause for themselves. You know, it does, Max. It is an interesting thing at the Pandora's box, because when like the Israelites were like, we're going to open this up to protect us, and then it annihilated them. So, you know, but going to that point, I think it's okay to be influenced by ancient things. We're humans. We influence each other, you know, and I think it's a sad thing too, that I see some people say, well, the Islamic community had nothing to do with the contribution. Sure it did. There was, you know, in mathematics and science, they were a part of that. But they're not the only thing, because some Muslims will do a very disingenuous tactic that I've seen, where they're like, we created math and science. I'm like, no, you were influenced by Greeks. You were a part of the Greek conversation. You brought it to another level, and then other, like, you know, European folks brought it to another level. Other cultures brought it to another level. All of that's fine. We're humans and we're working together, and I think we should see it that way.
Well, and Oz, I think it makes sense to look at these stories and to be like, this is just ludicrous. I mean, this obviously has no relationship to actual historical events, right? I mean, there is no sea god that swallowed the four winds and got popped to make the world. But I don't think that was ever like the intended reading for people to get this and to think that that actually happened. I think it was more just like, this is how we can deal with and appreciate the natural forces that we're surrounded by.
Dude, I have brothers that believed certain things about certain things that were very out there. So, like, there's irrational people that will believe really weird things. So, and they will get very angry if you try to contradict their claims. So, I don't know.
Yes, I agree with you there for sure.
Okay.
I don't think that was the ancient way of interpreting these texts. It might have been, exactly. It might not have been. Some people might have.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So they're like,
you're so much coffee breath. I'm sorry to interrupt. That's just one thing that was the point I'm trying to say. The way that they viewed things is very different than we view it now. We view it now like everything has to be literal. And it's not. That's not how these people thought. And we're trying to do this like retconning of trying to take our existence and like, for example, they said, well, people didn't like, you know, they were anti-gay. I'm like, they didn't even have a concept of homosexuality. Their concept was of public lewdness. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all consistently have that.
No.
There was no concept of same gender loving.
the Torah specifically talks about if a man lies with a man, they'll be executed.
But that's my point. That's not about homosexuality.
Not the Torah,
it's
excuse
sexual
me.
acts.
In the Talmud, it doesn't say in public. It doesn't say in public, but it says if a man lies with a child or a man lies with a man, it differentiates the two in the Talmud.
If you read into these texts, it is about, because how would anyone else see it? How would you know? If you do it in your house, nobody knows. It's don't ask, don't tell. That is
They're laws. If you get caught doing it, you can be executed.
But how do you get caught doing it? You do it in public.
We have
tied together.
We have laws about murder. Like it's always been. We have laws in the we had laws in the United States against that. It was only if you got caught. It's not. There were never public indecency laws against homosexual acts. It was only if you got caught.
But in ancient Israel, at least, there was this communal effect of sin, that even sins done in private had a communal effect, because the temple was such a pure place that sin attracted to the temple like a magnet, and you could only clean it with the detergic power of blood. And so that was the idea. As long as the temple is free of the contagion of sin, it will stay a place that the deity can stand to dwell in. And the only way to keep it clean enough for the deity to be there is to clean it every now and then with enough blood to get the sin off. So if you sit in your house and you sin and no one sees you sin, that sin is still going to get attracted to the temple. So you're still going to have a negative impact on the community. So the priestly source is saying, don't do these things because it's bad for the whole community, because if God abandons us, we're all screwed.
Yeah, and I thought Aristotle and Socrates may have never existed, but beyond the fact, I thought Socrates and Aristotle were both basically executed for blasphemy type laws also, or ran out.
Was like basically polluting the minds of the youth, I think, something like that.
Yeah, with his blasphemous ways, and then because he was denying the existence of their gods, like teaching them differently than what they were supposed to be taught. And
I didn't know Aristotle was assassinated. I thought
he was driven out of where he lived, as far as I can remember. Was Aristotle driven?
I want to engage the point that James Lavelle said about the accuser. The thing is, you don't just get the thing is, if someone makes an accusation, they put themselves on the line too. Yeah. How did they see this thing? It contaminates themselves as well. This is the problem. Like, if that's why I'm saying it has to do with the public. It's all baked and tied in. I get your point. It's not like literally, oh, this is a public indecency law, but it's just like how laws are interconnected and like woven like a tapestry. All these threads are brought together. So the thing is, if someone accuses someone of doing something like this, how did they see them doing this thing? You don't just see someone doing it on the street, because if someone saw it on the street, then a bunch of people saw it, and then that would be like a public indecency and causes a problem. But if someone saw this thing in private, then you put yourself at risk for making that accusation.
It's not. You have a relationship with another man and not a woman. It's like, it doesn't have to be. Anyways, it's just. It's the same way they get caught. They got caught in the United States and charged with the same type of crimes in the United States.
In the ancient idea, you can see the impact of sin on a person's life. So if someone is blind, they ask Jesus, who sinned, this guy or his parents? Nobody saw a sin occur, but he's blind, so someone must have sinned, because sin has this negative impact. So it wasn't always seeing someone sin. Sometimes it was seeing bad things happen. Who caused it?
Yeah. That's an interesting argument. That's a very interesting argument. I think but there is like a different, I would say, conceptual thing of how we see modern day Christianity in this, like the idea of chet and avera, like the transgression and missing the mark, how that affect, because like you said, there were modalities of purification. You had the modality of, animal sacrifice and the burnt offerings in the temple that would function as that. And you also had things like the Yom Kippur, where you're doing the Day of Atonement, where you have these types of elements of purification. So,
yeah, I do want to answer this thing from William R. with the ancients really had no special recognition if they did not do extended traveling. How could they notice the variation in sun's location in the sky if they did not travel? For instance, at the equator, sun rises almost directly east and sets almost directly in the west. However, at higher altitudes, the sun's path is more slanted. That's correct. They typically, when they said the Earth, it's typically translated as the lands, like their country where they lived, not the whole Earth. The concept of the Earth is more modern. Like once we started navigating the Earth,
For sure.
Yeah, I think it is an interesting thing. We don't. Again, I wouldn't take a literalistic point of view in how they view their cosmology. That's the way. Like from what I think we see in historical understandings of how the Hebrews operated, I don't think they had this same literalistic situation. They took from what they saw and used metaphorical understandings.
I think they believed it was true, that this was
Sure.
true about their lands, that this is all they knew about. It was very rare for them people to come from other worlds. And it was their worldview. Like, and it would be almost somebody coming from an alien, like coming from another world if they came to their lands. Like people traveling long distance was a rarity. It depended on where they were. Like in these time frames, like 500 BCE or earlier, like
Early bronze, 1200.
yeah, 1200, 1500.
I
Like
think
when did
the point I'm trying to make is it's different than like evangelical Christianity now. Like I even think the ancient Christians were very different than what we have with the evangelical Christians, where it's like, I have to prove that Jesus died on a cross and was literally resurrected. I don't think people had these types of concerns looking at the type of information. This is like a very modern concern because like with science, we're very proof based. We need to have proofs.
Yeah.
I don't think it was like, this is the narrative and I accept it as true, but it wasn't like I need to prove it.
I agree and I disagree. I think that in the early days of Christianity, you have a lot of hagiographies, which are these super exaggerated lives of the saints where they do these crazy, miraculous things. You have hagiographies of Jesus that are just now non-canonical gospels that talk about how he did crazy, weird things. So I think that there was a belief in this like super miraculous lifestyle among the early Christians. But I agree that there wasn't a belief not everyone believed that the story should be taken as historically accurate. I'm talking about creation event. These were more etiologies. And etiology is a story that explains how something got its name. So the word Adam in Hebrew is the word man, and it's Adma is the word for dirt. And so you're talking about the creation of man, might as well talk about why does the word for man sound so much like the word for dirt? Well, we must have come from dirt. So that's the creation of humans from clay is really just an etiology. It's just somebody trying to say, this is why these two words are related. And I think that concept gets expanded into these narratives that are cosmologies.
I agree. It's just like the thing that I see is like where they say there's thousands, in this like modern day, people are like, we need to prove like the world is 6,000 years old because I can show you from date to date. And I'm like, I don't feel that that's the way the text is to be conveyed. And I think they are using this literalistic framework, which is not what the text is conveying. And that's really the only point that I'm sharing. It's not that I'm like,
There is a story when Nathan confronts David about Bathsheba, whatever her name is, Bathsheba, and he's like, really, that's horrible. When did that happen? He's like, it was you. It was you, David. You did it.
Yeah. Well, Nathan is telling a story that is very similar, but he's telling a different story. And David's like, that's awful. How dare they? Yeah. I love that. I love that story.
Yeah. So just even within the story, he's telling a story that's a parable that's of David.
Yeah.
So like it's meant, and Jesus does this all the time, and he's telling parables about parables of the future or the past or whatever. Like he's doing this all the time.
Yeah, I don't think Jesus
And
thought the kingdom of heaven was really like a coin that you lost in the couch.
yeah, or like the mustard seed. If Jesus was all knowing and God, that he didn't literally believe the mustard seed was the smallest seed. If you believe this, it's true. He's just describing small things becoming large things. And it could have been one of his followers just misunderstood the parable, right? That he noted it incorrectly. But the parable can still be true. The concept could be still be true. And Aaron, even though the words that they wrote down were mistaken.
Yeah, I like to say that when we read the poetry in the Hebrew Bible, it never rhymes. And if you look at that and you're like, well, this is shitty poetry because it doesn't rhyme.
Yeah.
That's just because you're putting a definition of good poetry onto this literal form that didn't exist at that time. If you look at the mythos and you say, this is shitty history because it didn't actually happen, then you're putting a form onto that literary tradition that didn't exist at the time. There was no, this actually happened at the beginning of time.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's, and it's a good parable. I'm not saying it's divine. Like it's just a good parable, but, and William points out like the Greeks and stuff, but the Greeks, when they measured the circumference of the earth, they knew it was already a sphere at the time, but the Greeks were in like a center of trade and commerce where they were in the world. So they already knew with shipping, like ships and stuff like that, that the earth was a globe at the time. And Aristophanes was a polymath. He means he knew a lot of stuff. He was very good in a lot of different genres. He wrote the book, first book of geography. And geography at the time was he wrote about the different cultures that surrounded you also in your book of geography. So he wrote about the various cultures in his book of geography and stuff that he knew about in his Aristophanes geography book. And I have that book too, where I bought it. It was like $80. Pretty cool. But yeah, so that's why the Greeks in like 500 BC knew this stuff, where other cultures that were more isolated may not have known this stuff, like in North America, where they didn't have seafaring cultures like they did in the Mediterranean. Like, so that's why the Mediterranean, I think, where we started seeing these concepts take shape earlier on, and they recorded them earlier on, that we get this history from. There might have been other places that recorded these that knew of these concepts, but they weren't recorded. Maybe, who knows?
It's interesting. I wonder if, because I think of like the Philippines, the cultures that lived there prior to development of language in Samaria, they were seafaring people. I wonder if they had a flat Earth cosmology, or if they had a more globe spherical cosmology. I have no idea.
Aristophanes, 276 BC. Okay. In Libya. Was he in Libya? I thought he was in Greece.
No idea. Very
Greek map. It says he was Cyrene, which is Greece. So I don't know. Maybe that's modern Libya today. I don't know. Yeah, I get it. It's most of the world back. Yeah, but that is the right year. Yeah. I always just say 500 BC, whatever.
I think it would be really funny as a thought experiment if we had like ancient people from that time come to now and hear the dialogue between what people now believe about the cosmology versus what they believed about the cosmology. I think it would be really interesting. Even ancient Jews to Jews now, it'd be very different. Like there's heavily...
If people look at our culture 5,000 years from now and be like, did they really believe in zombies?
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, and it was interesting because like all these religions influenced each other. Islam influenced Christianity, Christianity influenced Islam, Judaism influenced, Judaism is kind of, the spring of all of these traditions. And also the modern Jews are influenced by both Christianity and Islam. So, and other religions, whatever cultures and religions that, that they're in. So.
And atheism has hugely influenced my faith. It's fixed a lot of the things that were broken with my faith.
Really?
Uh-huh.
But just the dialogue and
analysis.
Like I always had tension around this concept of hell, and hearing atheists talk about how it just doesn't make any sense really brought that tension to light and helped me explore it and finally come to grips with the fact that I think it's bullshit and it doesn't make sense. The atheists are absolutely right.
And there doesn't have to be a hell for Christianity to be true.
No.
And I don't think the ancient Israelites believed it either. I don't think they believe this is. I don't even know if Jesus believed in this. I think this is something that really was kind of constructed over time. Like I think John Milton and these writers from Europe really wanted to terrify people. So they were like, we're going to take some of these sources and kind of, expound on them and really let's terrify people. And they said, look at Satan. Like even the concept of Satan is something that developed. I did a lot of research on this and it's really fascinating. Like people thought Satan is this great demon, but in the Jewish cosmology, he's just an angel that functions under God. Yeah. It wasn't some fallen being. Like I like the Lucifer show. I'll watch that. I like that kind of Satan. The Lucifer show is entertaining, but believing that this Satan is coming to get me is
Well, I mean, Satan is attested in Job. That's probably it's Satan's biggest show on stage. And Job is, I believe, the earliest book of the Hebrew Bible. So I think the idea of Satan
do that too. Fraternal brothers like haze and they test the potential brothers to coming into the fold. So like a person testing someone and giving them trials isn't necessarily meaning like this person is an evil antagonist. The way that we see Satan, it's like this evil dude that just wants to have sex all the time and is just trying to destroy humanity. It's not someone who's giving trials to see if the person can meet the challenge. I think that that's very different than the Satan that we have now with the horns and, looks like like from Greco-Roman fusions. And I think it's kind of silly, but
the story of Job is horrifying. Like God is it's horrible too.
It's a really rough story. It is a rough story.
How is God so good in that story?
It looks at human experience. It says things suck sometimes, and like the earlier versions of Job don't end with like, and then everything was great. They end with Job had a shitty life, and sometimes people have shitty lives. And what's funny is that the name Job, Eov, is a play on the word Oyev, which is the accuser, which is one of the words used to describe Hasatan, hate Satan, in the Bible. So Eov, Oyev, like they're fighting with each other. There's this little tension in there. Maybe there's a little tension with the word Av as well, like father. But I think the book of Job is not about like, if you do things, then God will heal you for all your trouble. It's that, hey, shit happens. That's the book of Job.
I agree. I think it definitely, I think it's because you're dealing with people who really lived crappy lives. You think these Israelites lived great lives? It pretty much sucked. Like I did a whole paper, you can read all about it. It's, for my Hebrew, it was like a Hebrew class from like my religion program. And, it was like Foundations of Hebrew Cosmology, something like that. I forgot what it was called, or Foundations of Judaism. But I wrote a paper on Shamgar Ben Anaf, who is written, he has 2 paragraphs in the entire corpus. And one of the passages is the song, I think it's like the Song of Deborah or Devorah, where it says that in this time, or it's talking about Devorah, I forgot exactly, but it's talking about its bandits ran the land. Bandits ran this land, and that was the time of Shamgar. So like the time these people lived in was not great. It's not like the time we live in now where we can go to the supermarket and get food, and we have a lot of like civility and stability.
But
They didn't
they
have
had
those things.
it depended on where you lived. They had marketplaces and stuff like
But
that.
the Israelites, it
Go
was
and get
pretty
food.
rough. It was
Well,
not an
'cause
easy
it's
experience. They were like nomadic people. Like there's a whole passage about 40. You know, the whole point. In
well, that's if
40
you
years.
believe the 40-year period.
No, we
That
don't know. I'm not saying we know, but I'm
I
saying
don't
we know
believe
that these
that.
people were nomadic. These people were.
It doesn't take 40 years to get that far. It
No,
takes
I agree. I'm not disagreeing with
20
that.
Well,
days,
I don't
maybe.
think that's even true. I don't think the archaeology supports that there was a nomadic tribe. I think the archaeology supports the idea that the Israelites lived in the hill country and there was a power structure in Canaan, and that power structure went away when the Egyptians no longer controlled the Levant, because the Egyptians actually controlled Canaan until the year about 1000. They stopped controlling it shortly after Amenhotep, and because he like threw away the idea of, he invented monotheism, and then the priests in Egypt were like, fuck you, and they, anyway, there's a whole bunch of it. But I think that the ancient Israelites lived in the hillsides at that time and migrated into Canaan to take over when that power vacuum occurred. And you can see one of the things that's interesting about that is that one of the archaeological traits of early Israelites is this egalitarian 4-room house, which was this very particular structure for the way Israelites built their homes, where you have a single structure that has 4 different rooms in it. And one of the things that's really neat about early Israelite cultures is that there's basically no walls. They don't have fortifications around their structures ever. And presumably that's because there wasn't a lot of raiding in the hill countries and things. So it seems like it might have actually been a really stable and peaceful time for a very long time.
Yeah, if you lived out a childhood, like Aristophanes lived to be 82 years old.
Hmm.
If you got out of childhood, you were like, as long as you had a good diet, and the people in the Mediterranean typically, as long as they didn't like abuse their land, which was common during the time, because especially when the Romans took over, at least from what I understood it, when the Romans took over, they were taxing the land by the number of the trees that were on the land. So they would clear cut the trees, so it would ruin the landscape. So they wouldn't have to pay as much taxes. That's what I learned when I visited Israel. I don't know how true that was, but I don't know.
I think it's an interesting argument about the sedentary thing. I'm familiar. There is an argument for that, but I do think that the Israelites are a fused culture. There's probably multiple strands of people who have come together. The archaeology kind of engages that too, and you even see that like with someone like in the narrative of Solomon and David. Solomon's mother is not a non-Israelite, so there's probably definitely a contention that there was multiple, that it was not just like a monolithic space, but there was different communities that intermarried with each other.
Who was Solomon's mother?
Bathsheba.
Why was she not? She wasn't
Solomon.
I thought she wasn't Israelite.
Yeah, she's a Jebusite.
Oh,
because her husband was named Uriah, and so these things happened. People intermarried, and the Semites intermarried. I think the purist narrative is a false narrative. This idea that Israelite people are purist, a pure ethnicity. They're fused with all kinds of things. Same as Arabs. There's no pure Arab. There's no pure Jew. You know.
I completely hijacked your entire stream, Oz. I'm sorry.
We're talking about Hebrew cosmology, so it's all related. Religion, cosmology. It's all fundamental to the Bible's fundamental to this. We sort of went into all this. If anything, we're less sidetracked than we got into the other than we did.
Oh yeah. Should we talk about how Issa hates Europeans?
Even though I don't. I just don't like white supremacy. That's pretty much my only position.
I'm anti-imperialist.
I'm anti-imperialist. I'm anti-white supremacy. Like I think these are pretty based positions. You know, I don't think they're really. I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion
So you're
person.
anti-Islam then?
Well, I'm anti. If that Muslims who take that point of view, I disagree with them. I'm against
Well,
Christians who take that point of view. I don't think it has to be intrinsically Islamic. It is a narrative that exists within Islam. That would be my position.
it's not Muhammad's position. It wasn't
That's an
Muhammad's
interpretation of what some people believe Muhammad to say. And the same thing, some people believe that Jesus said you should gnash skulls under your feet. Some people take that point of view. The way I would view Jesus, it's not that point of view. I don't think there's one way to view any of these people, you know.
Yeah. Well, we had those conversations with Hussein too. Did you see those conversations yet, Issa?
Say that again.
We had that conversation with Hussein on stream too. Did you see that one yet?
Which
Me
one was
and
it?
Dr. J.
I saw a little bit of that. Yeah, I think he's a little more. I love Hussein, but I think I'm more on the progressive spectrum. And
But
he's
you don't
more
think
on
his
the-
isn't more traditional?
I think that it's a form of traditionality. I don't think it's one. Like again, it's like when we talk about Jews and Christians. I don't think there's one way of looking at this situation.
But you don't think most Muslims wouldn't think he's more progressive than?
Oh, think that he's more correct than I am? Well,
No, more progressive. I would think most Muslims would think Hussein was too liberal.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah, he and I probably would fit in progressive. We would probably fit ultimately in the more progressive camp overall. I agree.
But I would think Hussein, but I think Hussein's too like with the
conservative
Jizla or whatever. Yeah, like.
Well, and I'm more progressive. That's what I'm saying. I think we're more in the same camp, but I'm more on the progressive spectrum where I'm like, I accept different points of view. I don't think there's one way of doing things. I take a sort of. Do you know about perennialism, Coffee Breath? Are you familiar with that movement? Perennialism is sort of this idea that there's a wheel, and all of these spokes lead to the same space. So we all have different journeys and different paths, but we all get to the. If we do our journey in the best way we can, we get to the goal. We get to the same goal. So that is my position. I don't take the position that I'm better than anyone, and I think that's the problem that a lot of religious positions take. An exceptionalist. They're like, I am the best one. I am chosen. My path is correct. And if you don't agree with my path, then you're bad. You're a lower class being than me. And I don't believe in that. I think it's a really not a good path for me.
I certainly think my path is right. And I think my path is the best. And I think if you don't agree with my path, you're wrong. But I don't think that you're bad. I wouldn't hold my beliefs if I didn't think that they were right and correct. I used to think that Moses was real. I used to think that the flood was a real thing. And I evaluated those things and found that they just don't hold up. And I no longer believe those things because they aren't true. And so I don't think there's necessarily something wrong with thinking I'm right and you're wrong, but I'm right and you're less is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear that. I think when I'm saying, you could say this is the right path for you. I think that's perfect. I think that's a perfect position. But like saying it's the right path for everyone, I think that becomes a difficult space because, and that's the thing. Like you're right. Like I think you could say, look, this type of journey and practice I'm doing is good in my life, and it helps me feel fulfilled, and I appreciate it, and there's value to it. You're right, because why would you do this path if it doesn't have value? It does have value, and I'm not saying, and you can call that right or true or whatever term you want to use. You can go to church, or you can go to the mosque, or you go to the synagogue, or any mandir or whatever spiritual place, and that helps you on your quest and journey in your own life. I think it's amazing. I just think the difficulty for me is when people use their path to hurt other people. For example, I can take Islam. People say, well, if you don't pray 5 times a day, you're a bad person. I think it's such a horrible perspective. I think the idea is if you're doing 5 times prayer or 3 times prayer or going to church, this is something good for you on your journey. If you believe in God, that's your relationship, or the universe or the divine. That's your own particular journey, and it has value for that. That's my point of view on it. So.
Yeah, I would never be the person trying to convince anybody to become a Christian. I don't think there's any value in that.
Yeah, even like when I write my books, I'm like thinking really hard about if people do deconvert, where do I give them an off ramp to? Like, do I give them, like, I don't want somebody to suffer because they lose their faith in God or whatnot, because that is a real thing that really does happen. And so I need to give them like a soft off ramp to find another path, like where they get value and purpose and meaning from, and not just nihilism, because I don't think nihilism is a good place to be.
Margaret Mitchell was one of our New Testament teachers at University of Chicago, and in some of the classes where people who were in the like pastoral track would be in class, she would be teaching this academic evaluation of scripture, and she'd say, now this isn't so that you can come to church someday and just start rolling grenades down the aisle and blowing up everybody's faith. I mean, this is like, it takes a minute to get this stuff and to have a non-destructive understanding of these things. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Throw shade at nihilism. Well, I don't mean nihilism as in the philosophical view of nihilism, Tim Bob, but the nihilism is, a lot of people take it to mean, which is lack of purpose. Nihilism doesn't have to mean lack of purpose. I understand that, but it does.
What nihilism really is.
Yeah. So there's the philosophy of it. Anyways, and there's what Nietzsche taught, but a lot of people strawman what Nietzsche actually did teach. Absolutely. But I'm not an advocate of Nietzsche, and I'm not a nihilist. I'm Nietzsche nihilist, or like a non-purpose. Like, I find purpose through other means. So anyways, I'm a virtue ethicist too, and I do believe in morality. I do believe in meaning, and I do believe in knowledge. I'm not a skeptic. And when I say that, people get annoyed in the atheist community. Like, what do you mean you're not a skeptic? I use skepticism as a tool. I'm not a philosophical skeptic. I believe knowledge is obtainable. I think we can have knowledge. Skeptics don't believe you can have knowledge.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know how far I go in there. I kind of think there's no way out of the
trilemma.
I'm sorry?
The trilemma.
I don't know what that is.
What? There's no way out of what?
The idea that we might just be brains in a vat.
Oh, that would be solipsism.
Yes, that's it. I don't think there's a way to get out of that. You have to just say, all right, assuming we're not, and go from there.
I was actually thinking about that today. I was literally thinking about that walking today, and I'm just like, I can't take that. I can't take that position that I know. I can just say I live life that it's not that way. That's it.
I can take the position that I know without a doubt that I'm not a brain in the vat. So,
tell me more.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I just know I'm not a brain in the vat.
How would you know if you were?
I just know I'm not.
Oh, so it's just an assertion?
You could call it assertion. I think I'm warranted in that belief, based upon my existence. So you can say I'm not warranted. That's fine, but I'll just reject your claim. I'm not warranted.
So you have a justified belief, but how do you know that it's a justified true belief?
Pragmatic knowledge. So you can say I'm not. No, you can reject it. I don't care. It's just pragmatic knowledge.
Okay. I wonder if that's not saying the same thing Issa and I are saying, just in different words. Like, we're saying there's no way to prove that we aren't just brains in a vat, and we just say, all right, let's just move on as if we're not.
I just have no doubt. I have no doubt I'm not a brain. I have no doubt that I'm not a brain in the vat. I have no epistemic doubt. Like, I have no epistemic doubt that you exist. I have no epistemic doubt that this external world exists. I'm not. There's no worry. Like, there's no like hesitation. There's no like thought that it could be true. Like, there's not 99.9%. It's 100%. I'm 100%
I
sure
don't think
I
we don't take
exist.
that position too. I think we take the same position. It's just that we're saying we can't rule it out. We're just like, okay, that may be a possibility, but we're not accepting that as the possibility. You know,
I think it's just a useless.
it's unfalsifiable. You can't prove it. You can't not prove it. So it's just like, okay, it exists in science fiction, cool, but you know, but we don't have like some defensible. I think what Coffee Breath and I are trying to say is that you can't make a case that this is not a scenario. You would just say, well, you know,
I can't make a case to convince you, but I don't need to convince you. I just have to convince myself. If you want to say I just believe it based on intuition or feelings or whatnot, I don't care. I have no doubts. None doubt at all. I don't care what you think, if I'm irrational or not. I take it on 100% knowledge, like no doubts at all.
It's really similar to how I hold my faith, because I feel like I'm a person of faith because it seems authentic to me. And if I doubt it, then I feel like I'm being a less authentic version of myself. But I see the logical arguments for no faith, and I think that they hold just as much water as the arguments for the faith that I hold. So I exist in this little bit of a tension between a theist and an atheist, in that I think they both make perfect sense, and I just side with this one. I wonder if that's similar to what you're saying about this question of solipsism.
Well, you could be, but like arguments on intentionality, I have an argument for why I reject. So when it comes to intentionality, you have principle of proportional causation or principle of sufficient reason. These type of arguments, I reject them because I don't have sufficient reason for me to accept principle of proportional causation, principle of sufficient reason, or like the strong anthropic principle, stuff like that. I don't accept those as true. You can. So like the strong anthropic principle could say like you necessarily exist. So with that the case, like William Lane Craig says, abiogenesis could be natural and you just exist necessarily. So it gets around the fact that evolution and abiogenesis could be natural and you still exist. God could still be real and cause your existence through his divine providence.
Mm-hmm.
And you still have purpose and reason through God's providence. And there's no contradiction with the Bible, with Christianity or anything like that. The Catholic Church takes the same position. The only thing that can't be the case would be the soul. So the soul has to be created by God, but it's unfalsifiable claim. So, you know, and then I always ask, well, where's the mechanism? So I reject that a disembodied mind exists, which is the principle of proportional causality. I reject the concept that you need intentionality to cause intentionality. I think intentionality can rise from non-intentional things. So I believe that like humans can arise from non-intentional things. So I could accept like the weak anthropic principle, which says that humans can arise from non-intentional things. So if you're a God believer, like Christian, you should probably, to me, if you want to accept science, you just should accept the strong anthropic principle as being true. And that's going to be my argument for tomorrow.
Well, as a Christian, I think that those things make perfect logical sense. I don't think there's any reason to doubt the truth claims there. I think they could be true.
Yeah. Yeah. So I like
here.
What's that, Issa? You broke up.
I said I don't think there's any strong disagreement here in this conversation.
Yeah, I know, right? We don't have a dumpster fire going. We got to start talking about how Noah was actually 850 years old or whatever.
Yeah, I know. Well, people say, well, you just take that on faith. I'm like, whatever. Wait, is that an insult? Are you insulting me?
Right.
I don't care. Whatever you want to say. I have no doubt that I exist, you exist, this world exists. No doubts.
It's fine.
Okay. Now, what's now I believe everything that exists is natural. Now I have an argument for that based upon those three premises, and I have arguments for it, and that is an inductive argument. It's based on all the observations we have about the external world. Now, that we could have some disagreement on, but those first three premises, I'm like, if we have disagreements on the first three premises, you're denying reality even exists. Like you're dealing with solipsism, you're dealing with global doubt. Like if you deny you exist, that's global doubt. That's not solipsism. Solipsism if you deny other minds exist, right? So solipsism, you believe you exist, you just deny other minds exist. Brain in the vat is solipsism. Global doubt is if you even deny your brain in the vat. If you deny you even exist, that's global doubt. There's global doubters. A skeptic would believe that the external world doesn't know if the external world even exists. Is a global skeptic. Like they don't know if anything's true. Is a global skeptic. I'm not either. I'm a non-skeptical realist. I believe the external world exists.
And you just accept that by fiat.
Yeah, they would be axioms. I know they're true.
So,
well, you don't
I
know
kind of,
they're true.
kind of a similar worldview. I say,
Yeah,
well,
I know they're true.
You know, like
so
Pythagorean
how do you define knowledge?
Huh?
How do you define knowledge?
Pragmatic naturalism, justify true belief plus.
One thing that I just take things for like it's sort of like in mathematics. Like you have Pythagorean theorem: a squared plus b squared equals c squared. You just accept the formula that of the way that is. You know, water is H2O. You know, you accept. You know, 2 + 2 = 4. We kind of just accept these axioms as is, and that's kind of how I live life. I don't really think very much about it. I'm just like, look, these things are the way that they're working, the way they operate. But I don't go and invest and say, well, I know that they're true. I'm just like, well, I take them as true. That's the way I kind of live life. I take these axioms as true.
Well, that I accept is true through testimonial because I accept the scientific method as a pathway to truth. And through induction, we understand that H2O creates water. So I accept that as through scientific testimonials.
Would you accept the testimonial evidence for a deity? I mean, if I think that I have experiences of a divine being,
I accept it as evidence for a divine being. I don't accept it. It's not persuasive. Yeah. Because I reject all supernatural claims.
Yeah, makes sense. It's just a brain state.
Yeah. Yeah. I accept all testimonials as evidence.
So you've got a leg up on T-Jump and R and Raw in that regard.
Oh yeah, they're stupid. No, they
you funny.
They're not stupid. They T-Jump will accept testimonials as evidence.
Oh really?
And he accepts beliefs. His epistemology is not as stupid.
You know what R and Raw will teach us? He's like, it's all magical thinking. These are all just magicians. Yeah. It's a blood magic. I love how he said that.
I love that guy.
R and Raw, I met him. He denies having beliefs. I hate that, dude. Dude, you have beliefs.
We were there together, Ocean. Remember?
Yeah.
We were at the conference. I met R and Raw too. We were all together. I didn't come with you to lunch, but I was with you all.
I went to lunch with him, and he was. I don't have beliefs. I'm like,
well.
I'm just going to have a nice lunch with you, dude.
That's how we met, Ocean. The first time
Leo and Ryan were just there, chipmunks. Dude, and me and Aaron is like old people just sitting there.
That's funny. What's the moon falling into the black hole behind you, Ozzy?
Gravity.
Oh, I just realized that it shows up in front of your hand if you move your hand. I thought it was actually on that.
It's electrostatics. That's electrostatic.
Yeah, yes, it's a kinematic electrostatic.
Man.
I shared I made 2 pictures too. Let's see. Oops, not that. Stop sharing. I like Aaron. His epistemology's not the greatest. It's scientism, which isn't like really epistemology. Is there anything like important? No. Okay. So I made these 2 things for thumbnails for my debates coming up.
Yep, I voted.
Yeah. So I got it. I did a little Earth on one side and a moon on the other side of my eyes.
My wife just walked in. She said, he's on a flat Earth debate.
I want to debate the heliocentrism versus geocentrism tomorrow, it looks like, on Modern Day Debate. And then on Tuesday, it looks like I want to do a 2v2 with Fight the Flat Earth versus Dave, that Sovereign Saint Dave. Yeah. And somebody else. Yeah, he's like an older guy. And I don't know who the other guy is. Craig hasn't told me. Yeah, some newbie is all he said. That SSUM, I think it's a Sovereign Saint something M. Yeah, that Dave is off. But yeah, it's 2v2's a cluster. I agree. It'll be okay. Yeah, I can deal with that, Dave, though. He thinks like I'm savable, though. I watched his conversation with Flatzoid. Flatzoid was insulting me, but the Dave was like nice about me because he said, well, no, he's a good guy. He said Oz is a good guy. So Flatzoid was doing a debate review about Craig, and then he had to start insulting me because I challenged Flatzoid.
Oh, is that the one that they did? They reviewed the after show?
Yeah, he reviewed the after
I watched
show.
that for like 30 seconds. I was like, I can't take it.
But he was reviewing his debate with Craig, Fight the Flat Earth, and he brings me up, and Flatzoid starts insulting me.
Oh,
God. And Dave, the Sovereign Saint, whatever he calls himself, he defended me. I was like, cool, thanks.
Oh.
And he said, I think he's savable. And no, he's in bed with like Simon Dan and all these other people. I'm like, no, I'm not like them. First of all, I'm not like Craig. Like, I don't have a problem really with Craig, but I have a different personality from all these other guys. I don't try to insult people. Like, I might sometimes because I get annoyed, like with it sometimes, like the way they treat people. I do insult people sometimes.
Yeah. I've noticed that, like, watching some of these videos, sometimes I get annoyed with that smug confidence that's just dripping with ignorance, and I'm just like, it makes me so, I don't know why that triggers me so much, but it makes me so annoyed whenever I hear that kind of like laughing off a completely rational point and just being like, can you believe that? You're an idiot. I'm like, no, that's a completely cogent argument. Why do you just throw it away because it doesn't match what you already thought?
Yeah, so the debate tomorrow should be on Modern Day Debate, probably 8 p.m. against Witsit on geocentrism versus heliocentrism, and the debate versus Sovereign Soul and Chained Mind, and some newbie should be on Jeranism, I believe. I think it's on Jeranism. Yeah, need a partner for Jeranism. Me and Craig versus Sovereign Soul and Chained Mind and some newbie. So should be fun. So I got 2 debates lined up. I probably won't be able to stream on Monday because I got to go to an appointment in Mechanicsburg. Don't expect me to schedule anything. Maybe somebody else can, or I might do it at like 8 p.m. on Monday because I should be home about 5. Mechanicsburg is like 3 hours away. So
is that West Virginia?
No, it's in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
So tomorrow it should be against Witsit. Shouldn't be probably. It should be Witsit. Yeah, it's in Pennsylvania.
Did you have any other stuff that you wanted to talk about as far as the Hebrew cosmology goes? You're just pulling that up and seeing where it went?
Yeah, I don't know. It's only an hour and a half. You can't really go like too detailed in 2 hours. Just
Yeah.
a fun topic. Just sort of me preparing for my debate against Flatzoid. I'm going to take these 200 proofs. There's a book of 200 proofs from the Bible of the flat Earth. So what I'm going to do is take those 200 proofs for the flat Earth and reify them for modern cosmology.
So, I mean, I would say, I think that the Bible, if you read it as a literal text, does in fact support a flat Earth cosmology, because
Yeah.
that's what they believed when they wrote it. So I think it's a losing argument for people who say the Bible doesn't teach flat Earth, because it just does. I think the correct argument is to say that's not the point of those stories. They were telling us a truth around this, what they thought was real,
Yeah.
how the world was made.
Yeah, but I think you can also argue that God did divinely inspire it to be an eternal story that can be reified based upon our changes in understanding of the natural world, that we can redefine these terms like the firmament and stuff like that to be more modern concepts like the Van Allen belts and stuff like that, or our atmosphere, or our ionosphere.
I think that's a dishonest reading, though. I don't think that's what anybody meant when they wrote it. I don't think that's in there at all. You could read it into it and say, this is what God was trying to get that Israelite to picture when he wrote it. But I don't think that's an honest reading of the text.
Sure.
Where are you going,
Well,
Issa?
It's funny, I'm actually going to a Unitarian space. That's where I'm heading right now.
Oh,
They're having a dinner, and I got an invitation to come, so I'm going.
well, you are a Unitarian.
I would say in a lot of ways I fit that. I would definitely fit that bill. I don't have any problem with that.
Just not a Christian one. Well,
I mean, I think some Christians might consider me that. I mean, it doesn't really bother me. I'm really labels
well,
are not really.
you just don't believe that Christ resurrected, right? So
It's not something that I'm really concerned with. I'm far more interested in I'm interested in ethics and how you become a good person, and what does it mean to be the best human being we can be. I'm not digging in the mud of what happened in the stories. That's not important for me personally. If we're going down to brass taxes, I'm not. That's not an interest of mine. Like, Jesus died on the cross. I don't care if he did or didn't. I don't think that is the important thing. I'm like, what is the representation of what Christ is about? I'm far more interested in that than I am in literal history with these stories. That's where I personally stand. So.
I watched this supposed expert Christian debater. He did debate Graham Oppie. Graham Oppie was so nice to this guy, so polite. He kept interrupting Graham like all the time, like, and he's straw man, and I'm quoting all these. The guy was an idiot, anyways. And he wants to debate me. He's emailing James, and yeah, I watched one of his other debates against counter apologist. He calls himself, and he was saying that basically, how could a loving God do this thing? And then he wanted him to define love. And he was using, the counter apologist was using by analogy of it, how he felt for his son. He's like, I didn't ask for an analogy. I asked for a definition. How can you need to define love? It's like, are you basically, I'm going to paraphrase how I would paraphrase it. Are you a friggin' stupid, dude? You can't define love. You can only do it by analogy. That'd be like asking me to define good. Well, yeah, how do you define good? Are you a friggin' stupid, dude? By analogy. Have you ever, you call yourself an expert? Well, only God, the perfect being God, could define good and love. Dumbass. Like, you're not an expert. Go away. Like, you can only define these things by analogy, like by human experience. Like, otherwise you're just reifying the concept to mean something else. It's more as open question. Like
I
study
think
a
that's
little
the
bit
only
of
way you can
philosophy.
define anything, right? Is binality.
Yeah.
Unless
You
they're-
can define it, but then it's but then you're not really capturing the concept. And love could be multiple different concepts. Like it depends on the type of love you're talking about. And he was like talking about the love he felt for his child, which is a specific concept that anybody that has a child understands. Yeah.
I watch these debates, evolution and religion and flat Earth and stuff all of the time, and I think they're super interesting. But more and more, I'm getting just exhausted with the level of antagonism that exists between the two camps all the time, and I would love to see more of an attempt to just understand why you think what you think and pull it apart and find out what's rational about it and just hear what someone has to say. That's also super boring for most of the people who watch YouTube, so I'm sure nobody really wants to watch that. So.
Yeah.
I think it's a gladiatorial sport. That's what people like. They want to see blood drawn. And that's why some people come to debates, is they're looking for blood. And some people are interested in wisdom and they're interested in deeper thought. And I agree with you, Coffee. I think the idea is we should look at our ideas, see what our common ground is, and see where we disagree. And where we disagree is where the deepest conversation is going to be. Why do we disagree? What's the problem with where we stand? But instead of like insult and call people Jews, like, or call people terrorists, like these, it's just terrible. It's so lowbrow, and it doesn't bring to deeper knowledge and wisdom. And I think that's what this debate is supposed to be. When I think of Socrates, I think that was the point of these conversations: is how do I get to understand my thoughts better and where I stand better.
Yeah. I think I heard Flatzoid at one point saying something like, if you're not having this debate in order to win, then why are you having the debate? And I'm like, oh, that's why I don't debate. Yeah, that's why I'm not ever in any debates, because I would not want to win. I would just want to know what you think.
Yeah, it's to learn what you think and to explore these concepts. That's what I'm going into the debate tomorrow about. Is I'm going to just lay out my concepts. I exist, you exist. There's something about what I think, my difference between my imagination and external world. How can I tell apart the difference between the two, and why I believe physicalism is true? How I can know the universe exists and all these other concepts are true. And then, but that's not really how we determine what the center of reality is. And then I want to generate an argument for how a Christian would know what the center of reality is to a God through the strong anthropic principle, which is the God's divine providence, which is your existence is the center of reality through God's divine providence, not some physical location, because God isn't concerned with these concepts of temporality or physical locality. God would be concerned with his divine providence, and that's it. What he created, and not a physical place, but your eternal soul.
Sorry.
Divine narcissism. So that's going to be my debate. So I'm going to because this is what Witzik cares about. He thinks that the flat earth gives meaning and purpose to people's lives. And he thinks that this delusion of a globe and heliocentrism takes away from human purpose and meaning in life. And he thinks he's doing the world good by sharing this message that the world is flat. So my goal is to share this message that Christians, people do not have to accept that the world is flat, right, to find meaning and purpose. Theists, which is the majority of people, don't have to do this. And maybe I'll add on to the argument for atheists too. Maybe I can tag that on to the end, that they don't have to do this either. They can find meaning and purpose through the way they live their lives, through their families, through these other things. They don't have to believe they are the center of reality to have meaning and purpose in life.
Well, I think two things. I think the talk about if the strong anthropic principle is true, it was God causing me to exist through its divine providence, takes a pretty Calvinistic, deterministic sort of mindset about God. I tend more toward a Hartshorne's view on God as a omniscient but relative being that evolves and improves as human experience evolves and improves. So God is that than which nothing greater than can be conceived other than God. So the God now is not as great as the God now, because this one has the knowledge of what just happened. So I think that view, but I don't think that's going to suffer at all with Whitsitt, because I think Whitsitt is probably going to go more Calvinistic. So I think you'd be fine there. The other point was, oh shoot, it escapes me. Whitsitt wants people to believe in the flat earth so that he can save them. He thinks that this is the path to salvation or some sort like that. I don't think that's true, but I don't know. I think that Whitsitt believes that if you don't read the Bible literally, then your faith is at risk. And the only way to read the Bible literally is to accept a flat earth cosmology, because it literally is in the Bible. And if you don't take that literally, you're on the slippery slope of throwing out truths in the Bible, and then you just pick and choose willy-nilly what is real and what isn't. And then he would say that you're in my camp, and he would probably call me not a Christian because I don't think some things really happened. And so I think that is what Whitsitt is actually trying to do with the flat earth, is he's trying to say it's real. See, the Bible is literally true.
I think that's part of it. I think there's multifaceted. I think they believe evolution and the heliocentric model takes away from the value of our human existence, is what he's trying to say. So that it's intentionally done by Satan to hide our individual value. And it's stuff that Nietzsche wrote too, right? He sort of... his thesis is that it necessarily follows from evolution that humans have no value or purpose.
I don't know enough about Nietzsche to agree or disagree with that.
Yeah, it definitely, Whitsitt has narcissism. He thinks he's the smartest person in the room, Bob. Yes.
He comes across that way, but I've heard him in debates where he seems really reasonable and teachable.
Yeah.
But that's the rarity.
It's interesting that you said, like, we met Whitsitt too, Ocean, at the debate con. I mean, he seemed like just a chill, cool dude. I didn't see any. I thought it was interesting to hear that you felt that Whitsitt was, religiously arguing this point. I always thought it was just like because his arguments have been kind of a science-based type of argument that he makes. He hasn't made very strong theological arguments except the firmament and the ether, at least in the debates that I've seen. A lot of the other folks that are in this field are very like Christian oriented. I thought he believed in God, but I didn't know if he was like really just like a devout. So this is interesting to hear this, like that this is a part of his narrative.
Yeah.
At least that you think that.
Well, I've watched too many of his videos now. Is the problem. I've watched a lot.
I just saw the Matter State debate once. So on the Matter State debate once, he doesn't use those
modern day debates.
Matter Day debate.
You're mixing Matters Now with modern day debate.
Well, we should make Matters Now debates. Let's make Matters Now debates, right?
Yeah.
Modern day debate. Sorry, that's what I meant.
All right. So I'm going to close the stream out. Thank you, everybody, for watching. So expect to see my book review tomorrow at 5 p.m. And then a pre-show at 7:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for my debate with Whitsitt at 8 p.m. on Modern Day Debate. And then an after show after the debate on Modern Day Debate with Whitsitt. And then I'm not planning on doing anything on this channel on Saturday and Sunday. I'll probably take it off to prepare for my stuff next week. Oh, this Easter? I'm not doing anything. Whatever. And then next week expect me to go back to my reschooling flat earthers. Maybe I will do it at a later time slot, because it does seem like a lot of people don't like the 5 p.m. time slot, but there are some people that are in different time zones, so I don't know.
It's a
I
tough
seem
time
to
slot for me. That was why I missed the one that I was really hoping I would get to watch. But
Yeah. All right. Please like, share, subscribe, become a channel member, 99 cents if you got the 99 cents. I'm still working with YouTube to try to change that. I think I have to upgrade the $2.99 membership to like $5.01, and then you can gift a 99-cent membership is what I'll have to do, because it's what it is. Analytics saws. Yes. Thank you. Anyways, with that, thank you very much for coming. Thanks so much for the panels. And I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.
Max wanted
What?
To plug.
What?
I think Max wanted a plug. Did you get that about Dr. J?
Max wanted a plug. Oh, Sunday we have a show panel with Dr. J, part 2 of reading the book of the 200 evidence. Okay, awesome. So on Sunday, expect that show with Dr. J. Thank you, Max. All right, with that, talk to you all later. Check out our merch. See all that merch that Eats is wearing? Look at that. Awesome. Thank you, Issa. Bye-bye.